Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take these deep dives into fascinating topics, trying to pull out the core insights, maybe some surprising facts, and really those moments that make you feel, truly informed.
Exactly.
And today we're looking at something quite profound, human resilience, and the wisdom you can gain from people who've faced just unimaginable trials.
Indeed. And our focus today is the extraordinary story of Prophet Job, known in Arabic as Ayyub, peace be upon him.
Right, Ayyub.
It's a story that really powerfully weaves together immense suffering, but also just boundless divine mercy. The lessons in it, they just resonate, across time, culture.
Absolutely. And we're not just skimming the surface here. We've looked at some really rich scholarly accounts. They detail his life, the trials, that incredible spirit he had.
And some really surprising divine interventions, too.
Yeah. So our mission really is to pull out those key insights about getting through hardship, about what divine compassion actually looks like.
And even some fascinating sort of practical wisdom from the story. Legal stuff, almost.
You might think you know the story of Job, but stick with us. We think we've found some really remarkable details you might not have come across.
Definitely worth exploring.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Who was Prophet Ayyub before everything changed?
Yeah.
The sources paint this picture of just profound blessing. Yeah.
Oh, completely. He was a prophet from the lineage of Prophet Abraham, specifically through Isaac, so firmly in that prophetic tradition.
Good.
Geographically, he was in Haran. That's in the Levant region.
Got it. And blessed how? Spiritually?
Spiritually, yes. Deep knowledge, understanding, incredible faith. He was actively calling people to Allah, even mediating, mending relationships between people. Really active.
So a real community figure.
Absolutely. And then there's the material side. Immense wealth. We're talking 500 acres of crops, apparently.
100 acres, that's huge.
And over 500 servants and slaves. Plus vast amounts of livestock, camels, cows, sheep, just enormous wealth.
It's almost hard to picture that level of prosperity back then.
And family. A righteous wife and many children. Strong, healthy kids. At least 10, the sources suggest.
10 children.
Yeah. And on top of all that, he was consistently devoted, worship, remembrance of God. It paints a picture of someone who seemingly had everything.
It really does. It sets the stage, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For just how much was lost. The sheer scale of it.
Which brings us to, the trials. A comprehensive affliction, really almost unfathomable.
What triggered it, do the sources say?
Well, some accounts mention Satan, that hearing Allah praise Job's piety, Satan was filled with envy and he gathered demons essentially to inflict harm. It's presented as a very direct, almost personal challenge.
Wow. Okay. So how did it unfold? It wasn't all at once, was it?
No, it seems to have come in waves. The first blow was the wealth gone.
Wow.
Farms burned, crops destroyed. Livestock apparently swept away in a massive flood or torrent, just wiped out.
Everything.
Pretty much. His servants left and he actually released his slaves because he couldn't support them anymore. Utterly bankrupt overnight. Just gone. When you think about losing everything you've built, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do you keep faith when every single earthly comfort is just stripped away?
It's a profound question.
Mm-hmm.
And then came the second blow. Arguably, even more devastating.
The children.
Yes, his children began to die.
Yeah.
One after another. Until he lost all of them.
All 10. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Losing even one child is, unbearable for most. Losing all of them. It tests the absolute limits of human endurance.
Yeah.
But Job's resilience here is just remarkable. A strength clearly not based on circumstance.
It didn't stop there, did it? There was physical suffering, too.
Immense physical suffering. He was afflicted with smallpox, Jadari. Some sources even suggest he might have been the first person ever afflicted with it.
Really? The first?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Characterized by, terrible skin protrusions, pus, just agonizing symptoms.
Oh.
And it got worse. It escalated until he was bedridden. His hands and feet apparently became paralyzed.
Paralyzed, so he couldn't even move. Barely. Only his tongue, his mind, his heart, they remained functional for prayer, for remembrance. But physically, he was incapacitated.
That level of suffering on top of losing the wealth, the children, it's just staggering.
And then, as if that weren't enough, came the social isolation.
Because of the disease.
Exactly. People found his condition repulsive. They were afraid, contagion, so they distanced themselves.
So he was completely alone.
He was forced to leave his home eventually, ended up living in a remote tent with only his wife even his closest friends, they abandon him.
That's harsh.
And worse, some cruelly suggested his suffering must be because of some terrible hidden sin he'd committed.
Oh, that's awful. Adding insult to injury, literally. That psychological pain. Sometimes that's even harder than the physical stuff.
It often is. And this whole ordeal, this multi-layered affliction, how long did it last?
Accounts vary. Some say 7 years and a few months. Others go up to 17, maybe even 18 years.
18 years. That's a huge portion of a life spent in that kind of suffering. A real testament to patience.
Incredible patience. But through all of this, there was one constant, right? His wife.
Ah, yes. His righteous wife. She emerges as this incredible pillar of support, the only companion who stayed by his side through everything.
What did she do?
She nursed him, cared for his basic needs every day, and she courageously went out and worked as a maid for other people, just to earn enough money for them to eat.
That's amazing devotion.
But even that became impossible after a while.
Why?
People eventually refused to hire her. Again, that fear. They worry she might carry Job's disease, whatever it was they thought it was.
Oh no. So they had no income at all.
None. They were pushed to the absolute brink, which leads to this incredibly poignant moment. Her ultimate act of love and desperation.
What did she do?
She had long, beautiful hair, braids. She cut them off and sold them to wealthy women just to buy food for her starving husband.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Selling your hair.
It's an incredible sacrifice. And here's a really profound insight from the sources. Despite losing wealth, kids, health, Ayyub had remained steadfast. He never despaired over his own suffering.
Right.
But seeing his wife do that, selling her hair just so they could survive, that apparently is what finally broke his heart.
So it wasn't his pain, but hers.
Exactly. His empathy for her sacrifice. That's what prompted his famous prayer, his supplication, not his own agony.
What was the prayer again?
He cried out to his Lord, essentially saying, "Indeed, adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful." Simple, direct, acknowledging the pain, but affirming God's ultimate mercy.
There's another version too, isn't there? About his friends.
Yes. Another account suggests the trigger might have been hearing those two friends implying his suffering was a punishment for some great sin. That accusation, that lack of understanding from those closest, that could also have been the breaking point.
Either way, it was an external trigger related to others, not just his own state.
That's fascinating. It is. And it leads into this beautiful point about divine mercy. When Allah's mercy truly descends, he often grants far more than what was specifically asked for.
Like how?
Well, think of Prophet Moses. He asked for his brother Aaron just as a helper, right?
Yeah.
And Allah made Aaron not just a helper, but a prophet and a minister alongside him. More than asked. Or Prophet Zechariah, he asked for a son.
And got John the Baptist.
Exactly. And his wife, who was barren, was also made fertile. It's this recurring theme.
Yeah.
Ask. And the response, when mercy flows, can exceed the request exponentially.
That's a beautiful concept. So how did this apply to Ayyub? What happened after his prayer?
Well, the restoration was just miraculous. Truly unfathomable, actually. Allah commanded him, "Stamp with your foot."
Stamp the ground.
Yes. And when he did, cool water just gushed forth with the instruction. Here is cool water to wash with and to drink.
Water from the ground, wow. And then...
Instantaneous healing. Washing with the water healed all his external problems, the skin issues, everything. Drinking it healed him internally, just cured instantly. And it gets even more amazing. His youth was restored. He looked young and healthy again. So much so that when his wife returned...
She didn't recognize him.
Exactly. She thought he just resembled her husband from before the illness.
Wow.
And then her youth was restored too.
Both of them. That's amazing. What about the other losses? His family, his wealth?
Restored and multiplied. Allah gave him back his family. Now, some accounts say his previous children were actually resurrected.
Resurrected, really?
That's one interpretation. Others say he was granted new children, but double the original number.
Double. So like 20 kids.
Potentially, yeah. And his wealth also restored and doubled. Everything he lost came back, twice over.
That's just mind-blowing. The scale of the restoration matches the scale of the trial.
Absolutely. And he lived a long life after that, another 70 years after his recovery. And during that time, he was blessed with even more children, maybe 26 more.
Goodness, so the blessings just kept flowing.
They really did. And there's one more little story, it's quite interesting. One day, while he was bathing, golden locusts started falling from the sky.
Golden locusts, like actual gold.
Apparently, yes. And Job started eagerly gathering them up, trying to get as many as possible into his garment.
Even though he was already incredibly wealthy again.
Right. And Allah asked him, haven't I made you rich enough that you don't need these? And Job's reply was beautiful. He said something like, yes, O Lord, but I am indispensable to your blessing.
What does that mean? Indispensable to your blessing.
It means he recognized his constant need for God's grace, his reliance on it. It wasn't greed, but profound gratitude and a desire to receive and appreciate every single bounty from God, no matter how much he already had. Never taking any blessing for granted.
That's a powerful way to look at it. Wow. The whole restoration is just breathtaking. But the story offers more than just these grand lessons, doesn't it? You mentioned something about practical wisdom, legal stuff.
Yes, exactly. Beyond the patience and mercy, there's this fascinating insight into oaths and something called hayal, permissible stratagems. It comes from an oath Ayyub himself made.
What oath?
Well, apparently, in a moment of anger or frustration, maybe his wife had complained or shown despair temporarily, he swore he would strike her 100 times once he recovered.
100 times. Oh dear, that sounds harsh, especially after all her devotion.
It does, but he'd made an oath, and breaking an oath is serious. So Allah provided this incredibly merciful way out.
Ow.
The command came, take with your hand a bundle, like a bundle of thin branches or maybe palm fiber, something light, and strike with it, and do not break your oath.
So hit her once with the bundle.
Exactly. One single light strike with this bundle of, say, 100 flimsy stalks fulfilled the letter of the oath, 100 strikes, without actually harming his devoted wife. It preserved his oath, but showed immense mercy.
That's ingenious and merciful. So this introduces that concept you mentioned, hayal.
Precisely. Hayal. You can think of it as like ingenious stratagems or legal workarounds. It's about finding clever, permissible ways to achieve a just and compassionate outcome within the framework of religious law.
Okay, so permissible is key here.
Absolutely crucial. There's forbidden hayal, using tricks to get around clear obligations or to make forbidden things seem okay. That's completely wrong.
Right.
But permissible hayal is different. It's about finding an intelligent, non-harmful path out of a tricky situation without violating the underlying principles of the law. It's about fulfilling the letter, yes, but in a way that honors the spirit, which is often about mercy and justice.
That makes a lot more sense. It's like finding a loophole for good.
Kind of, yeah. But within the bounds of the law's intent. Not to undermine it, but to navigate complexity with wisdom. Like legal chess, as you said earlier, maybe.
Can you give some more examples? This is really interesting.
Sure. The classical sources have some great ones, often attributed to figures like Imam Abu Hanifa, known for his legal acumen. There's a story of a man who, in anger, swore his wife would be divorced if she spoke before dawn broke. Then he regretted it desperately.
Oh no, what could he do?
Abu Hanifa advised him, have the muezzin, the person who calls to prayer, make an early, non-obligatory call to prayer before the actual farjan, prayer time. The wife, hearing the call, would likely speak.
Thinking dawn had arrived.
Exactly. But since it wasn't actually dawn yet, she wouldn't have technically spoken before dawn. The oath wasn't broken, the marriage was saved. It respects the wording while finding a compassionate solution.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
Really clever. Any others? Maybe involving judges?
Yeah, there are a few. One involves a judge who had secretly married a second wife. His first wife was extremely jealous.
Uh-oh. Tricky situation.
Very. So to reassure the first wife, the judge had his second wife come visit their house. Then, with both wives present, he swore loudly, every wife of mine not in this place is divorced.
So the first wife thinks he's divorced any other wives.
Right. She's thrilled. But the second wife, she was in that place, so the oath didn't apply to her. She remained his wife.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's walking a fine line, but it achieved peace, I guess, using the precise wording.
It did, within the structure of the oath. It's about using language carefully. Another quick one, Judge Ayas, known for his wisdom.
Okay.
A man denied owing someone money. Judge Ayas couldn't prove it directly, so he called the debtor in and said, look, I trust you. I need someone reliable to hold a large sum of money belonging to orphans.
Okay, setting him up.
Kind of. The debtor, wanting this lucrative, reputation-boosting opportunity, was eager to appear trustworthy. Then the judge brought the creditor back in and basically told him, look, if he doesn't pay you your original debt now, I'll have to tell everyone he's untrustworthy and he won't get to handle this orphan's money.
Leverage.
Exactly. The debtor, faced with losing the bigger opportunity and his reputation, quickly paid back the original debt he'd denied. It wasn't direct proof, but a clever stratagem to achieve justice.
These examples really illustrate the concept. So, bringing it back to oaths more generally, What are the key rules or takeaways that arise from Ayyub's story and these other examples?
Well, Ayyub's initial situation touches on the idea of an oath made in extreme anger. Generally, if someone is so furious they've sort of lost control of their faculties, almost like being temporarily incapacitated, that oath might not be considered binding. The required intention isn't really there.
That makes sense. What else?
There are also what you might call vain or linguistic oaths, like just casually saying, "By God, I saw him," when you don't actually intend to make a formal binding oath. That usually carries no consequence or need for expiation. It's about the intention.
Okay, intent matter.
Hugely. Then there's the really serious one, the perjurious oath, Yamin al-Gamus, literally the drowning oath.
Why drowning?
Because it's considered so grave. It's when you swear falsely about something in the past, knowing full well it's a lie. It's considered a major sin, and the name implies it drowns the person in sin or even in hellfire. There's typically no expiation possible for this. It requires sincere repentance because the damage, the lie about the past, is already done.
That sounds incredibly serious. Is there any way to sort of cancel an oath if you regret making it or circumstances change?
Yes, there's a very simple mechanism. If you say, inshallah, meaning God willing, right after making the oath.
Like, I swear I'll do it, inshallah.
Exactly. Or similar phrases like, by God, if Allah wills it. Adding that condition effectively negates the binding nature of the oath. It makes its fulfillment conditional on God's will, so if you can't fulfill it later, you haven't technically broken a binding oath.
That's really useful to know. What if you just forget you made an oath and break it accidentally?
Forgetfulness is generally excused. If you break an oath because you genuinely forgot you made it, you typically don't need to offer expiation.
Okay, and what if someone else makes an oath about you? Like, I swear you won't enter my house. Do you have to respect that?
That's a good question. It's generally recommended as an act of kindness and respect to try and help someone fulfill their oath if it involves you and isn't harmful. But it's not usually considered strictly obligatory on you to uphold their oath. It's more about honoring their commitment if you reasonably can.
Got it. So if a binding oath is broken, and it wasn't out of anger, forgetfulness, or with inshallah, what's the expiation, the kafara?
Right. The standard expiation gives you options. The primary ones are feeding 10 poor people, or clothing 10 poor people, or freeing a slave, though that's less applicable today.
Feeding 10 people how much food? Like a smack.
No, it needs to be substantial, usually interpreted as a full average meal for each of the 10 people, or giving them the equivalent amount of staple food, like grain or dates, that they could use to make meals. It has to be proper sustenance.
Okay, that's clear. So feeding 10, clothing 10, or freeing one. Those are the ways to make amends for a broken oath. This whole discussion on oaths and hayal adds a really practical layer to Ayyub's story.
It really does. It shows how divine mercy operates, not just in grand miracles, but also in providing these, intelligent, compassionate pathways within the structure of law itself, finding ways out of human dilemmas.
So wrapping this all up, what does this incredible story mean for us listening today? Prophet Ayyub's experience. It's just packed with lessons.
Absolutely. It's the ultimate story of patience, Saber. It vividly shows the limitless nature of divine mercy, how restoration can far exceed the loss.
And it challenges that simple idea that suffering is always punishment, right?
Exactly. Affliction isn't always punitive. It can be a test, a means of purification, a way to elevate someone's spiritual rank. Its meaning is complex.
And as we just discussed, it even gives us this practical wisdom, navigating complex situations, oaths, finding permissible ways through difficulties.
Using the spirit of the law, not just blindly following the letter, especially when mercy is needed.
It leaves us with a lot to think about, and maybe a final thought to mull over.
Yeah, think about Job eagerly gathering every single one of those golden locusts, even after all his immense blessings were restored. What does that tell us about true gratitude? About recognizing and valuing every single blessing from God, big or small.
That's a great point. How do we find that balance in our own lives? Having patience when things are tough, but also actively seeking relief when appropriate.
And crucially, being deeply, profoundly grateful for every good thing that comes our way, never taking it for granted, just like Ayyub with those locusts. It's a constant balance, isn't it? Something we all strive for.